So I'll share a little bit of art, and we can get going from that. So this is the book that we're discussing. It's called Berserker. It's published by Boom Studios, and it's written by Keanu Reeves. So
Yeah, so
Keanu,
it's written by Keanu Reeves and Matt Kind, and Keanu is listed as the creator of this property.
okay, and it's he's never written a comic before. This is his first time dabbling in this kind of project.
Yeah, so he's co-writing. I don't know how much he wrote or if it's just his ideas and he just gets credited as a writer, but he's a co-writer listed. So
Right. So clearly he would need to have somebody brought on to help him with the writing duties. But what I what my impression is when I saw this campaign, and I could bring that up, is this book is trying to not necessarily sell Keanu's writing, although they want his name appended to it, but it's also trying to sell a bit of the tone that his movies typically carry. And I would
yeah,
expect that this book is trying to be a more of a visceral experience. So really, you would want to focus on the art and the imagery, and some of the more brutal, emotive, action-based experiences that you would have reading this
yeah,
book.
I would say this first issue is if you've ever seen a James Bond movie, you know, it always starts out with some action sequence and then it cuts to the title. So I think this book would probably, besides a little bit more, probably be like that first action hit of a James Bond movie. And then it has a reveal of what the Berserker character is, and then that's the general summary of what you're going to get in this first issue.
And did you feel that way as well, about Berserk Smug Pug, that it tried to focus on the action initially to draw the audience in and capture them?
I'd agree with Moonshine 100% on that. It actually does very much feel like the opening to a James Bond movie, where it puts him in a situation we don't know why he's really there, but it's just pure action all the way.
Okay. And so, given that it's focused on action initially, how would you describe those opening sequences, probably in the first few pages of this book? How well is that constructed?
So it's set up that, I mean, there's a 2-page spread where he's just sitting on a bench looking sad, but that's not too important. So he's on a helicopter with a small hit squad. There's like a commander that he isn't, and then they're about ready to go, and he just jumps out of the plane with nothing, or not the plane, the helicopter. And then the next scene, all of a sudden, there's people on the ground, and he has guns. So it's set up really quickly that he's something different. He's not just some military guy. He's like punching people and shattering their skulls with a single punch. So the action is pretty intense, and it's in the afternoon, so your palette is all red themed. So it's pretty much saying this is violence.
Right. So it's just dropping you head first into this kind of barbaric experience, I guess. It feels like John Wick meets Conan the Barbarian meets a little bit of Expendables, right? If he's kind of a mercenary figure here.
A little bit, but the rest of the team is pretty set up as they're just following him. They're almost doing they're helping a little bit, but it's the show is on him. He's doing most of the heavy lifting in this attack.
Right. And how's the art actually throughout
Uh,
this issue?
well, I remember last week we were talking about Common America, and I think both of us called it clean. I would call this art muddy. It's not bad, but it's intentionally kind of quick lines. If you like really look at things, that you almost could call it abstract, but from a distance, it looks pretty good actually.
Yeah,
Ron,
I'd agree. To be honest, I didn't think too much of the art. It wasn't bad, but I wouldn't say it was really outstanding either. maybe it's just because, in Comicsgate we're kind of spoiled for good artists like Ethan Van Sciver and Kanan White and Odie and John Mayall. But yeah, I'd say the art was fine. It was okay. It did its job.
I mean, it's the line work, I might, I guess, be if you favor this type of. I like the way they did it. I think it's a good decision to kind of emphasize the action rather than like very tight defined lines. But the panels are well laid out. There's not boredom in panel layout. There's actually quite a bit of things drawn into the background. There's one point in there's a room, and it's like a fancy room for maybe a president or something. And it's not just guys with guns facing him. There's like a chandelier. There's a foreground of a table with a miniature knight and lamp on it. So there's some thought placed into each of the panels as well. Yeah, so that's just when he jumps down from the helicopter, and you can see immediately out he has guns. He didn't come down with those guns. He just took them from these people.
I mean, did he even have a parachute? I don't think.
No, he just jumped down.
Right. So, yeah, there's a little bit of mystery established here. He's clearly an enhanced figure.
Yeah, and a few scenes later, people will be shooting at him and hitting him. He just doesn't care.
Interesting.
We may see that in one of these. I guess not.
A lot of cruelty and brutality.
Yeah.
Throughout.
I will say, the brutality's fine, but I would say the drawings of it kind of almost look silly sometimes. Like here you see an eye popping off and he's knocking people's jaws off and they go flying, whatnot. So if you don't like violence, you definitely probably don't want to read this book because it's pretty gory.
It feels a bit like a meat grinder just by the images that you showed there, Smug.
Yeah, it's definitely action-packed and full of violence and gore and everything you'd love in a comic book, I guess.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like it was very satisfying. I mean, were you kind of turned off by the violence a bit? Am I sensing that?
Not really. I mean, I'd say the violence was perfectly fine, especially when compared to like stupid examples of violence we've seen before. For example, the fetus being blown out of a woman's stomach in Graveyard Shift, or a disemboweled hanging cat in a certain other manga we reviewed a few weeks ago. Like, it never really feels like over the top in that sort of sense, but I'd say it was satisfying.
Yeah, I think later in the book, the gore is put to good effect because obviously he's getting shot, but at one point he takes a grenade in his hand and just uses it to kill someone, but then obviously his hand is like now a stump, and he gets his nose shut off. So it is like you see the battle damage on Keanu throughout the story, and I think that was well done. It's like he doesn't all of a sudden just get better immediately. You see he takes damage, but he seemingly just doesn't care.
So it's not meant to evoke disgust, but it is a bit combat zone grindhouse. It sounds like.
Yeah, at least for the first I don't know 2/3 you'd say, Smug Pug.
Yeah, I'd say around the first 2/3 of the book is action, and then it goes off into I guess the aftermath of the actions of the first 2/3.
And is that theming satisfying? Did you feel drawn in, curious? Were you stimulated seeing all this imagery and all of this over-the-top, almost cartoonish gore?
I mean, I think it sets the point that without saying anything, it shows you this guy is something different. And so you know right away, okay, this guy is superhuman in some manner, and no one tells you that. You can just read this and you'll see it because he's not stopping with things that should have killed men dozens of times over, and he's fine, or at least he still keeps going. He's not impacted except for the visual damage to himself.
One of the things that was a little confusing, I guess I'd say, is you'll notice here that throughout the first 2/3 of the book, while he's taking on these, I assume they're like some South American government or paramilitary force, he appears to be having a conversation with someone, although it wasn't really established who that is or who he's talking to. So when I first started reading this, I noticed, some of the speech bubbles here are blue, which match his eyes. So I assumed that was Keanu talking, and then others are white, so he's talking to someone else. And I wasn't sure whether maybe he was possessed by something, like the blue dialogue was maybe he was possessed by something and he was talking to himself, or if he was talking to his teammates, or if this is all taking place afterwards. It does give you closure on that, but it was a little confusing just to start off with.
Yeah, you eventually, I think, realize this is a conversation between him and someone else, and you meet this person he's talking to. It's pretty much like a recap of his mission that's like a dialogue while the mission is happening. It was a choice, I guess, to have some text, because otherwise there's very little talking, actually, in this first section. The unit lead says a few things to Keanu throughout, but that's about it. You'll go through pages with almost nothing said except for these dialogue boxes.
Yeah, it sounds like it's trying to draw you into a very specific kind of world and just provide you with a certain sensation prior to actually getting into any kind of more substantive story. And I'm just thinking of like the John Wick series. There's a bit of that there as well, where you're just drawn into the action immediately and you're not really given a lot of basis for it. I think one of them was his dog was killed or something like that, so he had to come out of retirement for revenge.
Yeah, so this is the one scene. So this is like there's, I mean, clearly a thought put into the scene design, whether or not you like the art or not.
Yeah, the action always feels really fluid. So you can see here, and
there goes another eye.
Yeah.
Here's him being shot, and you can see he just knocks that guy's jaw out. He doesn't stop at all.
Stomping in a head. Yeah, very, very gory, very visceral. I think this is a pretty good scene. He reaches in here and then pulls out a rib and then stabs the guy with his own rib. So it is very... It's good at what it's trying to do, I think, which is be an over-the-top sort of action, gory sort of... Yeah, in the vein, I guess, of like John Wick and Keanu's movies, his later movies.
Yeah, I would say the action is good, and since it's varied and he does things and it gets the point across, but I wouldn't say it's quite as fluid or interesting to watch as like the Xenotype book, where the fighting there is just very well done. It's like you can see the motion. Here it's more of, look at these amazing things you do, and his punches feel strong because things blow up as he punches them. So it gets the job done. It's probably not as fun, except for maybe the goriness of the action as Xenotype was.
Yeah, I'd agree. The action in Xenotype was a lot better.
And it looks a little bit Frank Miller-esque, with the muddied kind of visuals and graphic, depictions. So that's just my sense, but
yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, I think it's a style choice, and you might not like it.
So 40 pages. How long does this initial introduction to the character actually go on for before we get to some kind of story beats?
It's about 2/3, I think. I mean, yeah, 2/3, and then you switch signs, and then you see that he's with some military group, and they're cleaning him up, but they're also testing him, like cutting pieces off of him and putting all these electrodes on him, collecting his urine, I think, even.
That's fascinating. So he's a super soldier experiment in a sense.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess this is the essence. So it's set up that he's talking to one of the people, and it's like, she's like, did you have suicidal thoughts? And he's like, no, I don't want to kill myself. I just want to be immortal. So it's set up that he's immortal for some reason, and he's working with them because he wants the solution. He wants to become mortal again. He doesn't necessarily want to die, but he wants the ability to die.
Wow. Okay, so we really jumped pretty far there. So, okay, it goes from there's this conflict occurring, and they're evaluating his performance in this combat situation. But then there's also something that the character is tortured over as well, that's being expressed in a lot of the aftermath of that initial mission that he was sent on. And he's somehow a prisoner and not a willing participant.
He's not a prisoner. It seems like he's choosing to work with them because he wants something from them and they want whatever he can teach them. So it's like a exchange of wants between the two of them.
So
yeah,
significant mystery here.
Yeah, it does. It kind of hints at like during his mission that he's on for the first 2/3 of the book, something happened that triggered his neural pathways. That was something that the person he's having a conversation with mentions, that she wants to know basically what happened during the mission because we noticed some irregular brain activity. So something triggered memories inside, and she's kind of like interviewing him post mission, trying to figure out what that was, like what caused that stimuli.
Interesting. Sorry, I notice here Crimson. Yeah, I guess this is a new thing going on where if you're streaming over other shows, people have to get DM'd about it. I'm okay streaming over the Jack show. They're doing their thing and we're doing ours, and there's nothing wrong with having multiple streams. I don't think that takes away from us, and it certainly doesn't take away from them. So, sorry, back to the review. So, you said that somebody is trying to help him through this entire situation. I feel confused. So he's in this trial, and he seems like he has also something that he is trying to escape from, and he has people using him and supporting him both at the same time. Am I kind of getting that right?
Yeah, but he knows they're using him. He just doesn't seem to care.
He's fine with it. He's using them as well because he states that he wants something out of them as well. He doesn't care if they take his DNA and clone him, or have him do dirty jobs like he just did. He's got something he wants from them, and they've got something that they want from him. So it's almost like a symbiotic relationship that he has. I guess it's very pragmatic.
Well, do you get the sense that the people that he's working with are afraid of him?
I don't think so. Like even the commander calls him son, which is a bit ironic when what the twist at the end is. But they seem he's just a weapon that's working with them. I guess his demeanor is enough that they trust him enough that they realize he's not going to just murder all of them because he feels like it.
Interesting. Yeah, the character seems brutish. So it's interesting that they would also present him to be as fairly even and reasonable outside of these horrific combat situations.
Well, it's also kind of suggested that he thinks they're lesser than him because he says, "Oh, look, you know how to use all these technologies now." Well, and then to continue that, I'd have to go into the next spoiler part.
I think it's not really a spoiler. I mean,
yeah, it is the intro. Yeah.
Yeah, much of the the book's basically advertised as him being what he is. I think you can reveal the twist without spoiling it. I'm pretty sure everyone already knows.
Well, I just am curious about one thing. Does he have a sympathetic character that kind of he can speak through, or is he pretty much his own advocate, his own voice throughout the book? Is this mostly a lone wolf kind of story, or is there somebody else there that's along with him on this journey?
At least he has a conversation with someone, but I mean, mostly his thoughts and feeling. He's speaking through himself, and she maybe questions what he says and is like, "How do you feel about this and that?"
Yeah, I feel that the therapist in the last third of the book is probably that sympathetic character because she's trying to understand him. She's trying to get him to open up. She's very curious as to why his brain activity spiked on the mission under certain stimuli, and he seems very withholding, like he doesn't really want to talk about it. He's just in it because he has something he wants to get out of this organization, and they obviously have something they want to get out of him. So he does come across as a, I guess what you'd call an inverted, like lone wolf type, but there are people around him. I'm guessing like his military team captain and this therapist that do add that sort of human touch to the character.
Okay. So kind of a normal guy, but in an extraordinary circumstance. It sounds like he doesn't exhibit any kind of over the top traits himself. He's able to communicate, and he even sees a therapist. He talks about his feelings, and he's negotiating with these scientists who they have kind of a tit for tat relationship with. So
I do feel that he does have one, I guess, what you'd call character flaw, but it's probably deliberate. So the book's titled Berserker, and obviously that comes from somewhere. During the mission, he's basically told he needs to retrieve this target alive, and he deliberately disregards those orders and kills them. It almost feels like he does have this bloodlust while he's out on missions, and maybe he could be a bit of a danger and hard to control. So I guess that's where the Berserker name comes from. He's probably... then that might get explored, I guess. Hopefully in later issues, it's just once his blood starts getting pumping and once he's got enough bullets in him and enough of his flesh is torn away, does he just basically lose all semblance of himself and become, I guess, the Berserker, something that can't be stopped.
Interesting. It's a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah. Not as I guess obvious with the split personalities, but just, yeah, I guess maybe like just an uncontrollable rage or bloodlust that hopefully if the writers, have put that in there, they will plan on doing something with in future. This was just like the first issue, but it was almost just hinted at.
Well, and so both of you alluded to a twist that comes towards the end of the book. Would you like to share where that went?
I'll let Moonshine explain that part.
So she's talking about, do you remember things? And it's like, just like he tells her, I always remember everything. I remember all these events, and they're essentially things from hundreds of thousands of years ago that he remembers. And this guy remember every day completely. So you realize, oh, he's been alive for a very long time. But then she says there's some days you forget that you remember. So like she gives him some medicine or drugs or something. And so apparently when he killed this man on the mission, he sees a boy, and that triggered a memory that he's forgotten. And so the memory comes back, and he's like, oh, I remember when I was born. And then it reveals he was born 80,000 years ago in some prehistoric tribe. So that's where it ends.
Wow. Okay, well, I won't give my impression based on everything you've said, because I'm not the reviewer here. But it's I like the things that I'm hearing. It's got a lot of covers, and some of them are quite nice. Like I like that there's a huge variety of variants that you could choose from. So it sets up a lot of this mystery about the character. We now have a good sense of what kind of tone we'd expect from the future series. And we see that there's something that's unhinged, but also something that's hidden about him. What about things that could trigger those qualities and cause them to spiral out of control? What kind of challenges is he facing other than contending with who he is and how his behavior gets out of control?
Well, by now we've probably established that this Berserker, I guess, is that his name? I'm pretty sure that's his name.
The
too,
funny
right?
thing, there are no names in this book except for Stephen Caldwell, who's in a tiny panel. That's it. Otherwise, there's no names in this book.
Yeah.
So.
That was kind of, I guess, again, confusing, because it's just like, oh, we've got these characters, but we don't know who they are or what they're called. But I think he is called the Berserker. When I read the blurb on Comixology, he was simply just called the Berserker in that. So I guess I guess that's his name. But yeah, it does feel like he is at conflict with himself, and he does have something he wants. For example, we've established he's immortal, so there's a line of dialogue which I thought was pretty well done in the book. The therapist basically asks him, "So why do you want to die?" And he says, "Well, I don't want to die. I just want to have the ability to be able to." So I think after living for 80,000 years, he's probably starting to feel a bit tired. Maybe he's starting to resent being immortal. He's probably had family and friends, throughout the 80,000 years he's existed, and yeah, he just keeps existing. So I imagine that would take some, like, I guess, mental toll on anybody.
And honestly, I feel like the character you're describing is reflected in the title. It's muddled. It's missing pieces. All the vowels are gone. It's just harsh consonants. And it's descriptive of just something very visceral.
And there's quite a bit of repetition of that R coming back again and again.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there are things, it feels like just speckled all over the place here, that are setting up larger mysteries in a very savage setting. So, well, I guess I'll get to the question of, I think we addressed that there are no real adversaries set up in the first issue. It's all just the focus on the character and the conflict within himself.
Yeah, it's just purely an introduction. It tells you who, it presents the character, and then it ends the review of what he is exactly.
Yeah, I think Moonshine's description of the opening being like a James Bond movie was very, very on point and accurate. With most James Bond movies, they place James Bond somewhere. We don't know what he's doing there, but he's obviously doing a mission, and normally that intro mission has very little to do with the actual movie, and the main antagonists are introduced later on in the film. So I'm guessing maybe that's what will happen with Berserker. Our main antagonists will get introduced in later issues.
And did either of you receive a physical copy? I know Smug, you had a digital, but Moonshine, what was the quality of the book that you're actually holding? Good paper?
It's pretty good. They have a nice matte finish on the cover. The paper is mildly thick, but if you look at it, you will see a little bit of fluting, but the colors come through fine. It's not the most amazing thing, but it's $5. So for $5, it's high quality.
Yeah, because this is it's a crowdfund, but it's a crowdfund published by a semi-major studio, Boom Studios. They have a lot of other successful series that are on comic racks, so you would expect that the production quality should be a bit higher for the book.
I'm assuming Moonshine bought it from a comic book shop, because I don't think the actual crowdfunder has fulfilled yet.
Yeah, so yeah, those will be square bound. I think you can even get hard covered if you back the higher level tier. So this is just a simple floppy for $5 that you can buy in a comic store.
And I guess, okay, so the crowdfunder, there's going to be 4 issues in this story, and it's going to give you a complete story, or a complete set of all 4.
It will be 12 issues total, but 4 issues will be collected in a volume, which I think you can also buy. So I think the lowest tier you can buy in stores eventually.
Yeah, it's 12 issues across 3 volumes with 4 issues to each volume. And this is the first issue of the first volume.
I see. Interesting. Quite a lot of story then, I guess, to unravel. And I guess the crowdfunder helped also then with the publishing for the comic shops. This edition that we're talking about right now.
At least for advertising, because I think comic stores pre-ordered 600,000 copies of this floppy.
Yeah, 615,000, I think, was the figure, with an additional 135,000 back orders. So it is that is quite a lot for a comic book. I mean, I used to watch Zach's Comic-Con videos where he used to go over the numbers, and that is very high for a comic book shop to order, for comic book shops to order. That's 615 initial with 135 back issued orders. So that's close to, I think, 750,000 issues total.
Yeah, I mean, especially for this day and age, it's a lot of comics being published.
Sarah says she's getting the floppies. I might suggest waiting for the collected editions because I think that might be slightly cheaper because you're going to pay $5 a piece for these floppies. And then once there's 4, they'll collect them and sell that. So that'll be out approximately the same time as the Kickstarter's first book goes out.
Yeah, I prefer to get all my books in trades. I'd recommend waiting for all 4 issues to come out and then the first trade volume to come out as well.
So, were you happy though with your first foray into this story? Did you feel like this first issue was a worthwhile, self-encapsulated story and purchase?
Well, it's definitely not a self-encapsulated story, but I think it's certainly served the goal, but is intended to be an introduction, and then just get you excited to buy the next one. So in that case, I think it succeeded in what its goal was.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I thought it was all right. I mean, it is hard to review, I guess, properly because it is just the first 43 pages of what is going to be a multi-100-page story. But I agree with Moonshine. I think it did its job well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really good, but I mean, it has to be qualified as now it has to get into the story, so it hasn't really done that yet. So we'll see if they're able to do that.
So, would you like to give a rating, or do you feel like it's maybe too early in the series to really give a firm opinion on how things are shaping up?
I mean, if I was to give it a rating, like a number, I guess I did rate the White Lily issues individually. I'd say probably maybe a 6. I guess a 6. It's just like the art. The main criticisms I guess I'd have is the art. The art's fine, but it could have been, I guess, better. I don't really like judging art terribly, but like I was saying earlier, I guess, you know, with having so many really good artists in Comicsgate, I guess sometimes we are spoiled when it comes to the art, but not so much the story. There was little things here and there where I just thought, oh, you know, I wish Ethan Van Sciver was drawing this book, or I wish John Malin was drawing this book. Like, it would have been a lot more sharp and crisp compared to the muddy feel, unless the muddy feel is what it's going for. And then story-wise, I mean, like, I guess we've talked about the story as much as we really can. There's not too much really going on. So yeah, I'd say probably a 6.
Right, and it seems like the art is the focus in the first issue, since it's meant to be just mainly a visceral experience. There's not much story until the very end, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I like that the action wasn't very wordy. I think in Xenotype at some points they were talking a lot. Here it's action and it's fast paced, and it's just him killing people and the people he's fighting trying to stay alive.
And I guess you enjoyed it, Moonshine. You put it slightly above average.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's pretty good, but it's qualified by. It can't really tell me how good the series is going to be because it's just the introduction. But I think in that sense, it served it well. I like the art style, but I realize it's intentional. But it's clearly not going to be for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still a recommend from me with the 6. So I still have no problems picking up issue 2, and I'm interested to see like where it will go.
Yeah. It sounds like it delivered at least enough of a hook to get people coming back for a little bit more, but probably didn't offer as much as it could have for 40 pages. I had the impression that in 40 pages it would have gone a little bit further, but it sounds like it didn't. Which I guess we'll see what a 12 issue storyline looks like. Maybe some of the issues will be very story heavy, and we'll be longing for those long action sequences.
Amit Rayner says, "My God, this is longer than the Xenotype review." That is completely wrong, Amit. We've been talking for 44 minutes, and we spoke about Xenotype for an hour and a half. So,
yeah, I think we're done with the review. I think we covered everything that we can covered.
Amit asks, Smug Pug, is it better than Xenotype? Well, Xenotype I gave a 7, and this I gave a 6. So I'd say I enjoyed Xenotype more than Berserker issue 1. But then it's hard to compare those two because Xenotype is 200 pages of a complete first story arc, whereas this is just 40 pages of an introduction of a story arc.